I came up with the idea of wild encounters just because animals have been such an important presence in my life. Not just the cats and dogs that I have loved and lived with, but wild creatures. They are often on my mind in my waking life, in my art, and in my dreams. They've taught me things, provided meaning, and lifted me out of turmoil into a place of serene beauty. These sculptures you see here will be explained in the dream section. There is something about meeting the gaze of a wild creature that brings out our most alive selves. Part of that might be fear, but another part, I think, is connection, or a longing for connection. We are still creatures with our limbic systems intact. We're wired like our primitive ancestors, wired like animals. Because we've become so estranged from our fellow living beings, encountering a wild creature in its habitat now feels like an honor, a piece of grace, a spiritual experience. I'm going to tell you about some of my own wild encounters in my life and in my dreams, and then I'm going to ask you to share some of your own, so be thinking about that. In 2012, I was able to take a trip to Namibia, which is on the southeast coast of Africa, just above South Africa, where I saw herds of elephants and zebras, watched ostriches and wildebeests running across the plain. I've seen toucans, monkeys, sloths, and iguanas in Costa Rica, but the wild encounters that sit in my heart the most are with individual animals with whom I've shared a mutual gaze, and animals that have appeared in my dreams to teach me something. It's hard to choose which ones to talk about. There was the owl in Alaska who swooped up from a creek bank as I was walking through the woods to the outhouse at 5 a.m. We surprised each other. I'll never forget those yellow eyes with their piercing black pupils surrounded by feathery white moons. So close I could hear and feel the whoosh of its wings. Or the trumpetfish I managed to find myself eye to eye with while snorkeling off the coast of Turkey, a long eel-like creature with a long nose that flared exactly like a trumpet. At first I was terrified, but we examined each other fixedly until I ran out of breath and had to surface. But I'm going to settle on 3 main encounters with an oryx, a monkey, and an octopus. Oryx. While in Namibia, late one afternoon, our group took a walk out into the landscape behind the cabins where we would be staying. It was a hilly, rocky terrain. An oryx appeared from behind a hill. It was maybe 50 or 60 feet away. Its exceedingly long ringed horns extended straight up into the sky. Its face was dramatically black and white, a puzzle of angular shapes, with 2 white points extending down its face like an inverted echo of its horns. My heart quickened its pace and my attention was riveted. I immediately thought of African masks and imagined how this dramatic creature might appear as a deity with mysterious powers to ancient humans. Early humans believed a god would adopt the skills, strengths, and behaviors of a particular animal to help them in their godly work. I would bow down to this creature. Where did we come up with the idea that humans are superior to these majestic beings? Well, that's another sermon. At the end of this walk, the sun was setting. 2 giraffes crested a hill like black shadow puppets against a glowing orange screen. Monkey. About 30 years ago, I took a trip to Costa Rica. The trip was filled with wonderful wildlife sightings: toucans, sloths, alligators, anteaters, and iguana. But my most close-up and personal encounter was with a monkey. We had just arrived at our rustic jungle lodging in the Monteverde cloud forest. I don't know where the others were, but I was out on the porch of our inn, and I saw a monkey sitting on the railing. I squatted down to be less threatening and to get a better view. We stared intently at each other. What lively, intelligent eyes it had. I could almost see it thinking. Little did I know it was sizing me up. It then walked around the side of the railing closest to me. Suddenly, I feel these little hands and feet land on my shoulder blades, and then long, skinny black fingers went down my forehead and stole my glasses in a flash. He ran off, that little trickster. At this point in the trip, I had managed to get a bad case of laryngitis, so I ran to the desk, half squeaking, half whispering, "My glasses! The monkey has my glasses!" My glasses were soon returned to me intact. "You were lucky," the innkeeper said. "He usually likes to drop them down the chimney." I had to laugh. I'll never forget the odd pressure of those deft little hands and feet landing on my back as I was tricked by this wild, distant cousin. Octopus. My interest in octopuses began when I woke up to a story on NPR about the octopus in the New Zealand aquarium who had escaped from its tank, slithered across the floor, and out into the ocean through a drain pipe. Wow, I thought, this creature planned that. What a wily, smart, adventurous little mollusk. Later on, the book The Soul of the Octopus came out, and I was able to learn more about them. Shortly after that, I was teaching a sculpture intensive up in Vermont, and I had a student making an octopus out of wire. I brought up the book and asked her if she'd read it, and it turned out her father was the caretaker of the octopuses in the aquarium and was in the book. She arranged a visit for me, and I had the honor of meeting Freya. As I stared into her wide eye with its rectangular horizontal pupil, I could really feel a consciousness staring back, taking me in. I slowly put my hand in the tank and stroked her incredibly soft, fleshy head. They have no bones. She began to wrap her tentacles around my hand and wrist. It's hard to describe, as I'd never felt anything quite like it. She tenderly explored my skin. Each segment of each finger seemed to offer new information. "She's tasting you as well as exploring you by touch. She likes you," the caretaker said. "Some people she squirts and sends them back. She finds you very interesting." I was honored that Freya found me so tasty and interesting. I was getting dozens of miniature hickeys at once and discovered that Freya liked me so much she seemed to be attempting to pull me into the tank with her. For a relatively small creature, they have a lot of force. I actually required help in extracting my arm from the tank. The sound of each suction cup popping as it was gently and unwillingly ripped from my interesting skin made me both laugh and squirm. It's a creature friendship I won't forget. Animal dreams. I remember once buying a tape of whale sounds and songs. I had had some incredible whale dream and I wanted more. I had heard beautiful whale songs that started as haunting, sonorous cries that traveled up and down the scale and seemed to echo throughout the ocean. I put the tape on in the evening, thinking I would go to sleep by it and have some mystical experience with the deep. What I heard was a long series of noises that sounded like squeaky hinges and farts. This was not going to send me off to sleep. After being momentarily perplexed and disappointed, I had to laugh. How naive. Of course you can't have a mystical experience of your own conjuring. You have to be graced by it. and you have to be ready for it down in your bones, not in your head. Whale. I've been fortunate to be graced by many animal dreams, including whale dreams. They've helped me, taught me, warned me, inspired me, and given me comfort. I often don't remember much about my dreams anymore, but years ago, when my waking life was a mess, I had one intense dream after another, and many vivid ones involving animals. I swam along next to a whale once, feeling its silky skin, and then feeling large patches of barnacles that were sharp and rough. In another dream, I had rowed out into the ocean in the dark, going backwards over the waves, only to find myself later canoeing down an inlet surrounded by orange sun-drenched dunes. Suddenly there was a rift in the water that was getting larger and larger. I paddled as fast as I could until I reached the beach. As I ran up the beach, I saw a huge shadow and then heard an enormous thud. A whale had thrown itself up on the beach. I was shocked, horrified, but I went to it. Its eyes, so big, yet so small for its body, was sad and deep. My therapist later said, "Things aren't okay and you're unconscious." "Oh," I said in breathless wonder. I was young, good at making metaphors, not so great at seeing my own. Hyena. Less than a year ago, I had a dream that instilled another valuable lesson in me. I saw an animal on a porch that seemed to be a combination of a hyena, a bear, and a badger. It looked directly at me, and I thought, this is not good. And it moved toward me, slowly at first, then ran at me, jumping up, snarling and snapping. It kept pummeling me. My breathing was ragged, and I felt panicked, but I just stood there and took it. During this attack, I remember saying to myself, "Breathe, just breathe." I kept taking big breaths until eventually I calmed down, and this animal got bored and left. I woke up thinking, wow, I just conquered the anxiety monster. The situation that had precipitated the dream also calmed. And then I built a sculpture, my first sculpture with teeth, right here next to me. That's the beauty of sculpture for me. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes I can literally take an experience out of my rib cage, give it form, and put it in front of me so I can see it from the outside. So don't get your fingers too close to this. Lion. I once had a dream that I was crossing a field flanked by a forest. I was with someone at first. As we walked through this field of tall grass, I noticed a lion standing at the edge of the forest watching us. I said to my companion, "Squat down, put your head down, and put your arms over your head." Then the other person disappeared. The lion slowly walked towards me until I felt this huge presence and his hot breath as his nose touched my hair. I was terrified and thrilled and honored at the same time. My fear was transformed into humble reverence. It instilled a feeling of being wholly present and accepting in the face of whatever comes. Many years later, I made a sculpture based on that dream entitled Encounter. I was pleased when an art reviewer described it thus: "This does not appear to be a doomed encounter. The lion is calm. He looks curious. Encounter doesn't fit the old formula in which either man conquers nature or nature conquers man. Instead, it raises questions. Is the person cowering or bowing? Is this a metaphor for how humanity ought to approach nature?"